Have you ever found yourself staring at your to-do list and feeling completely unmotivated, maybe even stuck, and wondering, why can't I just get things done? You are certainly not alone. What if I told you the reason for your motivation is not what you think, and it is not your fault? It may actually be deeper than you think, and the answer to reigniting your motivation could be easier than you ever imagined. So let's jump in and explore what is motivation, what are the different types, what prevents our motivation, and how can we create more of it. There are a few types of motivation. There's intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation, and a few other types that we don't need to dig into today. Let's keep it simple and high level. Intrinsic motivation is the drive for something that you actually want to do. It's innate to you and it comes naturally. It's created by things that bring you joy. Extrinsic motivation is created by a drive from something outside of you. Maybe it's moving towards a goal or getting a paycheck, or in some cases, avoiding punishment or negative consequences. If we consciously remind ourselves of the outcome that we desire, we can help create more intrinsic motivation. You can incorporate things you love, like music or movement or novelty, through going to new locations, and you can trick your brain into thinking it's more fun. Some people will even suggest shifting your mindset. Control your mind and convince it to do the thing you want to do. But I'm here today to share with you that there might be deeper meanings why you feel unmotivated and why some of these surface level tips and tricks may not work. So the two underlying deeper reasons you may lack motivation could be unhealed trauma or a lack of dopamine. And in some cases, unhealed trauma can lead to a lack of dopamine. Dopamine is known as the reward molecule and the thing that creates motivation in us. I'll get into that in a minute because that will bridge us into the tip on how you can naturally create more motivation without the hustle and the pushing and the grinding for now, let's look at some of the common experiences that we go through that actually point to unhealed trauma. If you experience chronic fatigue, you're always physically exhausted, or you have physical health, that may point to an overactive stress response, whether that's fight or flight or fawn or freeze. If you are in a fight or flight response, you may experience hyperarousal or hypervigilance, which can be extremely draining to your energy. In the fawn and freeze state, you are under-aroused, although still in an activated nervous system, and that also can lead to a lack of motivation if you are more prone to a stagnant state. Or if you have constant feelings of being overwhelmed or anxious, or you struggle with depression, this difficulty of managing our emotions can also point to unhealed trauma and zap your motivation, making things seem bigger or more daunting of a task than they actually are. If you struggle with a strong inner critic, a loud inner critic who's constantly nagging at you and shouting negative thoughts at you, if you have a lot of negative beliefs about yourself or about people or the world around you, that can also come with feelings of unworthiness or incompetence, which again would point to unhealed trauma. And this can be very unmotivating because it will lead to a lack of confidence in your ability to achieve your goals or to trust those around you to do what they say they will do. If you find yourself taking on too many tasks or feeling overly burdened with responsibility, or even struggle with a lot of procrastination, this can seem like a lack of motivation, but actually points to unhealed trauma because it is an avoidance behavior that can often be driven by avoiding triggering situations. If you struggle with planning or making decisions, if you struggle to be on time, or you struggle to stay focused on a goal or a task, the difficulty in organization or setting goals, or even following through with plans, can point to impaired executive function. Again, very common in a traumatized brain, similar to the changes we see in the brain and body after complex or traditional trauma. If you struggle with feelings of hopelessness or helplessness, if you find yourself feeling like no matter what I do, I cannot create change in my life, if you feel like you've tried everything, but no matter what, circumstances won't change, if you feel like it's futile to continue to try, or you've tried everything, of course, this will lead to a lack of motivation and again points to unhealed trauma. If you struggle to trust others, or you fear rejection, or you avoid situations where you have to collaborate with others, or if you have social anxiety, again, that will be demotivating. It will suck your energy and points to unhealed trauma. And finally, if you feel disconnected from your goals, or you struggle to know what your goals are, or if your dreams and goals look more like surviving and avoiding society instead of thriving, this again could point to unhealed trauma. It starts in early childhood when we learn to suppress our needs and goals and desires to survive, elevate survival over personal growth. And of course, without a clear drive towards a goal, we will lack motivation. So the good news is motivation, like I said, is directly connected to dopamine. Dopamine is the reward molecule. Dopamine is the reason that we struggle with screen addiction or scrolling addiction, or we doom scroll multiple times a day. Dopamine is also the driver of addiction. Gary Brecka said that the absence of dopamine is the presence of addiction. Low levels of dopamine can make you feel tired, unmotivated, and moody. You might feel unhappy, have memory loss, sleep problems, or low sex drive. Low levels of dopamine can, of course, also be driven by trauma. Low levels of dopamine can be caused by toxicity levels in the body, obesity, processed foods, seed oils, stress, and of course, unhealed trauma. And as you know, I am a firm believer in somatic healing therapies. I do something called trauma spotting. You can check out my courses and offerings below. Here is the tip for you to start to boost your dopamine. So let's start by asking the question, are your activities depleting you and making you feel tired, or are your activities feeding you and making you feel happier and more motivated? Start to notice, if you doom scroll on your screen, how do you feel afterwards? If you go for a run or exercise, how do you feel afterwards? And for those of you who are recovering high achievers like me, if you push too hard and you're using willpower to keep powering through moments where you're not being fed, you should know there will be a crash on the other side. You can't be pushing the gas pedal all the time. This also goes for that doom scrolling. If we continue to scroll and scroll and scroll, we're spiking dopamine, there's going to be a crash on the other side. Alcohol and sugar will also cause a crash. Processed foods, highly palatable foods all fall in this category. So if you have been doing this for a while, you will notice that there's going to be a few days of recovery. We have to come back to baseline. We will have to go through the crash, but it's okay. It's good news is it only takes a couple days to reset. I've found about 3 days to be the magic number. So allow yourself those 3 days. Don't push yourself too hard and wait for your body and your dopamine system to naturally reset. And know that the feeling of postpartum depression is normal, to quote Andrew Huberman. And in the meantime, while you're waiting for your system to reset, keep an eye on those thoughts, especially if you identify as having unhealed trauma, because you're going to have that negative inner voice or inner critic who's going to tell you there's something wrong with you, the world is crashing, everything feels like a problem in that 3-day reset of postpartum depression. But the good news is if you choose positive thoughts, you can already start to feel better in that waiting period. But they have to be honest, positive thoughts. You can't tell yourself the sky is purple and expect to feel better about it. But you can say things like, I'm making progress. I'm moving in the right direction. This feeling of malaise is actually a good sign my system is resetting. Remind yourself you are one step closer towards your goal. You're a little bit closer to feeling more motivated. And once you've reset your system, you need to start to learn what creates dopamine for you. This kind of goes back to the intrinsic motivation. There are certain things that will spike dopamine for you that don't for others. I like a certain kind of music. I get excited when I find new music, and that is a rush of dopamine in my system. So what is specific to you will be different for someone else. Then start to set little micro goals. It's good to have a big goal, but we want to have little achievable micro goals in between, because if I am only allowing myself to feel the dopamine when I have achieved the great big giant goal, I'm going to burn out. I'm not going to get that hit of dopamine that I need to keep me going. So as we set micro goals towards our bigger goal, something that's more achievable and will happen in with the next day or two or week or so, then you're going to get those hits of dopamine, which keep you motivated. Remember, dopamine is the motivation molecule. We get dopamine when we achieve. So make it not so much about the grand thing that you have accomplished, but that you have completed little tasks along the way. Something like making your bed bed, putting away the laundry. As you know, I'm really big on purpose. If you want to step into your purpose, start to identify, schedule a session with me, start to identify those milestones of healing and recovery and getting into your purpose, discovering your purpose, and the little micro milestones along the way that will give you that dopamine hit of feeling like you have accomplished something. We want to attach the dopamine to the process, attach it to the effort in the process. If I have a to-do list today, I want to make sure that I take time to celebrate each of those wins. Maybe at the end of the day or at the end of the week, I have something to look forward to. We don't want that to be a glass of wine or a trip to the pub, but maybe a walk in the forest, because the forest is for rest, something that you love and enjoy. Maybe it's a massage, maybe it's a baseball game. And what we are doing is we're choosing to see progress along the way. We're making each day and each baby step something to celebrate. Smaller goals and milestones equal new mini celebrations. And when you create that sense of accomplishment, you create the dopamine hit that gives you the motivation to keep coming back. So you get to define. And again, note, if you have unhealed trauma, that strong inner critic is going to want to minimize the good things and amplify the bad things. Recognize that that voice is lying to you. Make sure that you create very valuable rewards that you actually enjoy and take the time to really appreciate those celebrations. And remember, you have to be the one to provide the reward. We're not waiting for the external environment to give us evidence of value, worth, progress, or achievement. If your external circumstances are the source of your reward and your dopamine, you become a slave and a prisoner to your external environment. And this is all about taking your power back and recognizing everything you need is within you. If you want to learn more about taking your power back, check out this video we just posted recently. Otherwise, check out our courses and coaching, links below. I love you, my friends.